Hello and welcome to Exploring Glorantha. I am JM and this is my good friend Evan. We are here to talk to you about Glorantha, to explore it, to explain it, hopefully in a high level 101 style class. Although this is episode 36, I believe.
37.
37. This is episode 37. So we are clearly starting the fourth year of this, which puts all of you into the 400 level classes. But still, that is not our goal here. If you want an even deeper dive, please go check out the wonderful guys over at the God Learners podcast because I just can't esteem their show high enough. Hello to everyone in the chat. Good to see everybody. Yes, indeed, let's go. But before we start, Evan, any updates on when Red Moon and Warring Kingdoms will be in our uh, 13th Age Glorantha Starved Hands in print on demand?
The short answer is no. The other answer is soon. Soon. We got a bunch of corrections and those are getting put in, but the file processing and everything is in the much more capable than mine hands of Trisha and Tim Baker. And I know that our target date was around this next week, but I cannot make any promises. But soon.
When will then be now? Soon.
Soon. Yes.
And in case any of you are going and are interested, you can find me at GameholeCon, which is about a month out at this point, I think. About a month out in Madison, Wisconsin. I know Chaosium will be there, and I believe there may be Dragon Pass books available.
Nice.
So, welcome to what I promise is probably mostly the final end of the Second Age. And this is the one where it all comes crashing down. Because we can't have the end of an age without a bunch of things blowing up. We could also probably title this episode, and this is why we can't have nice things again for the third time in Glorantha. So, Evan, let's talk about what's going on here at the end of the Second Age. I know, James, you're going to be there, and I am looking forward to hanging out.
Well, as we get to the sort of the last 2 centuries of the imperial age, with these two great empires that had ambitious beyond the bounds of hubris projects. The wheels basically come off, and there's a whole series of things, conflicts, and disasters that strike, and the cumulative effect is to leave the world probably in a worse state than it was at the end of the first age. So,
I mean, that is sort of the cycle that was begun by Tolkien, and that the truly mythic settings don't leave, they can't avoid coming in contact with it. I mean, that goes all the way back to Greco-Roman myth and Sumerian myth and Babylonian myth and the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? The idea that, right, antediluvian knowledge was greater, and the only reason that the line of kings can continue in this post-diluvian age is because of, like the Apkallu, the 7 Apkallu spirits who come and teach the Babylonian kings, right? But this idea that each cycle of the world, Greece had it. We had the men of gold and then the men of silver. Things are winding down. And so we have a series of, we call them unfortunate events, or is that trademark? And I don't want to get us all sued. So we have a series of falls, and each little fall are like these stones that herald an avalanche. And each little fall is the next domino that brings us to a much larger fall that eventually ends the Second Age. But from a GM perspective, things in Glorantha are always recapitulated, which means they kind of drop below the surface and they come up again in new and interesting ways. And when we talk about the Ziztor experiment, I cannot help but see echoes of the red goddess and her apotheosis kind of being played out, or this came before, right? So this is kind of a prescient sort of, or a foreshadowing of what's going to happen with the red goddess. But Stafford was very keyed into this idea of recapitulation of myth and theme. So I don't think it's accidental. But I'll turn it back over to Evan to set the stage for us here.
Yeah. Well, when we have these, each age is trying to get back to the perfection of the God time in some way, and each age instead takes us farther and farther from that. And we had it with the Nice Lore Gabaji project. Zister is actually kind of it's an echo of it, but it's not quite the scale of Gabaji, and nor is it the scale of the Red Moon Goddess, but it follows that pattern, because the idea was, I mean, they had created this industrial city, and we talked about sort of the Da Vinci punk developments that were fueling the military industrial
I was
complex
just gonna say that.
of
Stealing my jokes, Evan.
of the Middle Sea Empire. But underlying it, that was just a byproduct. The plan was to create something that would transmute creation itself and impose a logical structure on the cosmos, because even with all of their work on the monomyth, there were things that did not fit. There were inconsistencies which frustrated the logic-driven God learners.
And if I may take a quick aside here, that is something that we will always deal with when trying to impose a logical, systemic framework on reality. There will always be remainders, there will always be things in the margin which do not fit within our grand unified theorems. And the true heart of those in charge are always revealed when they encounter this margin or this remainder and how they deal with it.
Yeah.
And the God learner's heart was revealed with, well, we're just going to smash these things into oblivion and grind them to dust, and then there won't be anything outside of our logical framework.
We're just gonna see if we can't manufacture perfection, which is interesting, because of course the Mastali are trying to do that too, but they, of course, they have the blueprint, for the world machine, and they're trying to fix it. And they did not see this as, oh, the God learners are figuring out, the right thing. It was like, no, the God learners are going to mess everything up, because they have no idea what they're doing. So the machine, gains sentience. It gains divinity of a sort, which of course offends the universe, and brings a coalition together that would not otherwise have cooperated. Something called the New Unity Army, which had EWF backing, trolls from the Shadowlands, the Old One, the traditionalist Orlanthi fighting alongside the draconized Orlanthi, and a 10-year siege. Oh, where have we heard that before? Anyway, a 10-year siege of the clanking city, where
all comes together with a mechanical horse.
Uh,
with people hidden inside of it. And then Orlanth bursts out.
uh, I mean, your Glorantha will vary. Um, but it is an epic conflict, and ultimately, there's the Zazister is the mind, the power within the city, but it has a sort of automaton or avatar that is able to go out and devastate areas and fight. Ultimately, um, the heroes fighting uh, against Zistarella manifest Orlanth. Orlanth appears on the battlefield and crushes Zister, and the city is broken open, and everything they can get their hands on is destroyed. The the dwarfs go and wreck everything, take everything that's not bolted down that they think might be useful, and they booby trap everything. The trolls leave hungry spirits and
Mm-hmm.
and horrible things. It's and as we've talked about now, it's the machine ruins and the clanking ruins, um, but they're still there, and it's a fascinating
Yeah.
spot. But
And we'll talk more about this at the end, but again, the parallels between Orlanth versus the Machine God and Orlanth versus the Red Goddess
mhm,
are too numerous to be accidental or be anything but essentially a fractal of the battle that is constantly waged between the god time and the deeds of mortals as they,
yeah,
we'll call
yeah,
it mess around and find out the god time.
yes, that's right.
Morning, John Hume.
Yeah.
So,
I just wanted to say, so this 10-year period of intense siege and battle damages both of the great empires. It drains a vast amount of blood and treasure from the EWF, and ends up destroying one of the main investments of the Middle Sea Empire, and leaves them both wounded.
yeah. Then we have one of the most mysterious and cool events of the Second Age. And I remember reading Gloranthan supplements early on and being fascinated by the event known as the clothing. And the closing happens sort of for reasons, and it goes away sort of for reasons, but it's one of these mysteries that I love about Glorantha. Much like Tolkien, Stafford would come up with things that felt right, but have no answers for why they were. And I'm sure that there are a lot of theories, and Jeff Richard is the new keeper of the lore. But when I was reading it originally, we were like, why did this happen? And so the blue planet disappear or the boat planet disappears in
Yeah,
1920.
which
Just
is
goes away. Right?
right.
This navigational symbol. And then Brethos is closed off from the ocean.
Yeah,
Ships try to sail out of the ocean and they hit something, this invisible force that starts to spread throughout all of Gloranthan oceans and basically destroys the ability to travel the oceans to navigate. And if
yeah,
you've been paying attention for 5 episodes, you'll know that one of the empires of the Second Age, one that has a deep tie to Brethos, is known as the Middle Sea Empire. So you can imagine how well this goes over.
yeah, yeah. In a period of 50 years, something radiating from Brithos closes the oceans to any kind of sea travel, at least by mortals. Um, and of course, the seat of the Imperium for the Middle Sea Empire is in Sessionella, and it loses its ability to launch its naval power. But of course, the intellectual force of the empire is at Juristella, and it is cut off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's where, of course, the Holy of Holies is too. The abiding book rests on Juristella. Now, of course, the God learners are like, well, we're going to solve this.
Of course they we are.
And and they actually have uh, uh, sorceress heroes who are able to fly. So you're not sailing on the sea if you're flying, through the air. So
That's right.
for a period of time, they're able to stay in touch with the Sessionella and the imperial capital. But eventually that too closes down. But I mean, this is not just about the God learners or the EWF. I mean, this strikes
Everyone.
everyone.
Comatella
Everyone,
as well, right? Like
yes, all the
from
way.
east to
Yeah,
west.
right. And the at the end of the first age, of course, the rulers of the oceans were the Wertagi, the boat planet Diros, as it's known in Dragon Pass, is known as Wertag in the west.
Yep.
It disappears and it sweeps the Wertagi from the ocean. Now, before they are driven either beached and marooned, or they sail down Magasta's uh, um, the
Paw.
whirlpool at the
Yeah.
center of the world, Magasta's pool. Um, uh, they they do enact terrible vengeance on the port cities of the God learners as well. So there's a lot going on. Um, it's assumed that this is a byproduct, either a direct intention or maybe just a unintended outcome of some spell that Zabur, the first wizard on Brithos, cast. But nobody really knows what
Yeah.
what the intention was, or whether it really was him. Although pretty much, that's to think about who had the time and power to create something that was this disruptive and that would last for 6 centuries, ending ocean travel, ending communication from between the continents. Um, Zabur is your number one suspect.
Well, and we talk about how Glorantha can be viewed as a post-apocalyptic
Yeah,
setting. And it really is probably more accurate to say that it is a post-apocalypses setting. And this is one of them.
yeah,
Like
right,
imagine if suddenly 80% of our global communication went away. 90% of it. That's basically what we're seeing here.
yeah,
Because in a Bronze Age society, sea travel is really the fastest and somewhat most reliable, especially over the distances that we're talking about.
right.
Now, third domino. I mean, I can't necessarily dismiss our comment from Rojura. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Zasbor just dislikes sea travel because he got seasick. It's very easily. He was just like, shut it down. How much of it? All of it. Shut it all down. There's no Dramamine magic in Glorantha,
That's right.
so I'm just done with it. So, Evan, for those who may be coming into the episode fresh, so in the youth, in the EWF, the Empire Worm Friends, they are building towards their grand ritual.
Right.
They're and give us a no, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Yeah,
what is the intent of the grand ritual? And then we'll discuss why they can't have nice things.
right. Well, so the intent is to transform sort of the central part of Genertella, with the spine sort of down Dragon Pass, into a giant cosmic dragon that's going to sort of transform everything, the consciousness of every person within the empire, and unleash sort of unlimited cosmic power potential, um, and probably make permanently make the leadership of the EWF into sort of cosmic deified beings, maybe cosmic dragons, or that as we talk about the end of this, we'll realize why we don't really know all the details, uh, because of course it didn't work out quite the way they intended. But the leadership, the third council, is being worshipped as gods, and it would appear that they were sort of masquerading as the deities that were being worshipped. There was someone who was subbing in for Orlanth and probably subbing in for Arnalda and the other draconized versions of those cults, but instead of the power going directly to the gods, they were being fed into the members of the council, who are using this for the great ritual, a multi-decade effort to try to transform the world and merge these disparate parts, using the mysticism of the dragons. But not everybody was cool with that.
No, and in fact, the grand ritual kind of goes off with a whimper and spirals out of control because rebellions start to plague the EWF.
Yeah. And in some ways, their explorations and those of the God learners sort of sowed the seeds of their destruction, in that heroes who opposed, particularly EWF, learned the lessons of hero questing, and were able to, in going back to their sort of their roots, but reaffirming and strengthening them, turn back and really strike a blow against the empire. And so you have the revolts that happen in Darahapa and Talistar, that are fueled
Mm-hmm.
very much. The main Orlanthi hero is Alacoring Dragonbreaker. It does what it says on the box. This guy became a great dragon slayer. There's also a warlord in Carmania, the half brother of the Shah of Carmania, Serval Star, who also had a secret for dragon slaying. And the human emperors, the actual descendants of Yelm, are able to come back in Darahapa. Carvanyar, who was called the poor woman's son. His father had been the son of the emperor that had been displaced by the sun dragon, but had to live the life of a blind beggar. But the son is born, and he helps lead the revolt. He overthrows the dragon son. It gets said both ways: sun dragon, dragon son, and refounds the next dynasty of Darahapa. And then, just to further bother the EWF, Jaldan Toothmaker, or Jaldan Golden Tooth, arises in the wastes and leads the Praxians back into Prax. They besiege and destroy Pavis, which was not directly an EWF project, but was allied to them. And then from there, continuously invade Dragon Pass. So there's just an endless amount of conflict and the need to divert energies, both attention, but also raw, sort of magic that would otherwise be fueling the Great Dragon plan. If you think of it, to use a pop culture reference, if you saw the movie Oppenheimer, where they were putting marbles into a big fishbowl to indicate this is how much enriched uranium we have to fill this bowl in order to be able to make the atomic bomb. It was like they had a big bowl, they're putting marbles in. When it's filled, the ritual will transform the dragon and we'll have it here. And they were taking marbles out of the bowl.
Right. They were constantly diverting resources away from the grand ritual, not just magical and physical resources, but also personnel resources. And eventually, there's this buildup, and then they can only kind of keep it in abeyance for so long before it starts to unravel. And it unravels in sort of the worst way, rebounding against those in charge of the grand ritual and then spreading out throughout the EWF.
And those leaders that sort of descended from the realm of purity that they had been sort of bathing in to superintend the message, not the message, but the ritual, in coming back and entangling themselves with the mundane things of the world, like rebellions by people who can kill dragons, it caused them to really fall into decadence and to use their power not to sustain the ritual, but instead to pursue their own pleasures and interests. And so there was this period of decadence there at the end of the empire. The empire was contracting, but it was still too powerful for its core to fall.
Right.
Darahapa and Talistar and Carmania were not going to be able to invade to take what the empire had, but the empire was uh, uh, had hit a sort of homeostasis where it wasn't growing, it wasn't developing spiritually, and it was starting to rot from the inside.
So, Evan, we've got a really great question from Eric. Was there any involvement of chaos or its representatives in the rise or fall of the EWF?
I think the main conventional answer is no. But I think there's some footnotes. Both the God Learners and the EWF messed around in Duraster.
Yes, which is where the Brew Emperor is.
Right. And there's some indication that maybe the God Learners woke Ralzakart up. Yeah. Because he seemed to have been destroyed at the end of the first age by Arcat and his followers. But that seems to have been at the margins. I think that the epitaph that's generally written of the Imperial Age is that it wasn't chaos, a surging chaos that caused the destruction and misery, ultimately the dissolution of the Second Age. It was just the hubris of the imperial projects.
And that's something that I want to pull out and tease out when we get to the end for GMs. It's real satisfying to lay all of the blame of things at the feet of chaos. I do it all the time in my RuneQuest games. However, I think the Second Age shows us that even left alone to our own devices, humanity will find colossal ways to screw things up. Speaking of, welcome to our fourth domino, which is where. So, another game that is uh, deeply important to me is Mage the Ascension. And Mage the Ascension has this rule that when you use magic, you're essentially pushing against the rubber band of reality. And the more vulgar your magic is, the harder you're pushing against that rubber band. And eventually, that rubber band is going to snap back in your face and give you some paradox. That's what happens to the gods learners. Like that rubber band example is kind of my best idea. They have spent so many years messing around with the god time, thinking they can control it, playing musical chairs with gods and goddesses, warping the god time to the way they think it's best presented. And then it all falls apart. And as the great sorcerer Hallwall proclaimed, the Godluners were doomed from the start, as the great mystery cannot be reduced to logical parts. Mystery predates law and reason. If you haven't read a lot of Greg Stafford, just like writing in the old magazines or listening to some of his discussions, this is his voice. This is a Staffordism if I've ever read one. And eventually, the cosmos, which has been seemingly docilely accepting all of the God learners messing around, wakes up, and it wakes up angry. The oceans close. Sheshnella, Slantos, and Drustella sink. The other world just goes, yeah, I don't wanna, and sort of snaps back violently into the way that it always was, is, and will be. Right? It's the God time, so we're talking about eternity in a temporal space. So, right, and the Middle Sea Empire is sent reeling. And in fact, nature itself kind of rises up against the God learners and is like, well, that was too far.
Yeah. It's described as, there's a series of things. The empire, because it was this world spanning, uh, uh, multi faceted enterprise that was had nodes of control across different areas, all linked by the sea power of the empire. The closing shatters those links, and then each individual sort of part is eventually strangled. The holdings in Pamatella get overthrown. The control over Kralorella is lost. But the Empire, I mean, in effect, is dead. They have no control. They eventually lose contact with Durastella completely.
One of my favorite parts about this is, again, recapitulation, things moving in a circular pattern. And right, the Middle Sea Empire was established by its naval victory over the Wertagi with all of its fire rain and firebergs and just destroying them. And here at the end, vomited up is what my notes say. Thank you, Evan. From the Sea of the Dead are the Wertagi, along with all of these other sea powers that we can only imagine were bound, restricted, or enslaved by the machinations of the God learners in the Middle Sea Empire. And all of the shades of the drowned rise up from the Sea of the Dead and attack the God learners.
Yeah. So much like the EWF, there is still the core of
Mm-hmm.
the kingdom of Seshnella and their holdings in Slantos, and uh, the hope maybe we can reestablish contact with Durastella, etc. Maybe we can turn things back. Um, and then something that's called the Sundering happens, and
And that's fine. It's a happy
it's
thing.
yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
It was fun. It was kind of a party.
that's right.
Um, so 990. If we're looking at dates, the empire really is not functioning anymore. But it isn't until 1049 that a ship that is not affected by the closing, because it is piloted and sailed by giant demigods uh, from the west, um, where we last encountered them during the Lightbringer's quest.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they show up in Seshnella, and the mighty forces of magic and arms is mustered by the king. Um, and it's barely worth having one or two of these demigods pause to turn to take care of them while the rest of them finish the ritual that they are involved in. They obliterate the military might of Seshnella, and then with the Sundering, the land of Seshnella is shattered, and a great deal of it is sunk. So now there are just islands, and the shock waves of this, much like the closing, sort of radiate out. We don't know the precise details, but Jurastella is sunk, the abiding book swallowed by the
Yeah.
ocean, the survivors of the God Learner schools uh, drowned and destroyed, buried under earthquake, and the goddess Slan in Slantos wakes up, uh, and uh, and it's described as that she turned over, and um, and so everything there is shattered and destroyed and sunk, and so all of the final holdings that where you know there maybe was this thought of maybe we can rebuild, maybe we can recapture part of the empire, maybe we can turn back the closing. All of that is wiped out physically, but even more importantly, after that, uh, these these individuals, these
Mm-hmm.
beings called the gift carriers, arrive to root out the heart of God Learner Power, which was their secret, or probably a combination of secrets of how they understood and manipulated uh, the God time. And everyone who knew that secret, and everybody who knew someone who knew that secret, or was related to somebody who knew that secret, was destroyed.
Yeah.
And that was the end.
But wait, there's more.
But wait, yes.
Because while the Empire of Wormfriends limps on for about another 80 plus years, eventually the Inhuman King, who is the highest, most evolved, just this shy of a true dragon newt, decides, well, look at what they've done with all of these secrets that I gave them. I don't like this. Well, what's the dragon newt to do? The secret's out in the world, unless you're the Inhuman King, who, along with a small band of the Blue Moon cult trolls, kill a ton of key EWF people, steal or destroy the important artifacts that were gifted or created based off the secrets that were shared, and then erase the knowledge of Ald Wormish, the dragon tongue, from the minds of millions of people, not just in the EWF, but throughout the world. He just reclaims all of that knowledge. So suddenly, the magic upon which the EWF is built is revoked. Their
Yeah.
uh, their license was not renewed for another season, and this is what causes the Empire of Worm Friends to it does not exist anymore. Like the foundational cornerstone has been removed. Now, vestiges still remain even to the Third Age. Delecti the Necromancer, one of my favorite villains of Glorantha, is believed to be from the EWF. The Tusk Raiders, depending on the origin story that you buy for the Tusk Raiders, and the Beastmen, which escape from the zoo. Yes, Eric, it is a very Tower of Babel like event. Um, oh, Rujura said their Dragon Pass was revoked. And that, Tink, you're in the chat. We can find some way to make that a t shirt. That would be amazing. Sorry, your Dragon Pass has been revoked. The
Right.
Inhuman King. That's brilliant. Like,
Yeah.
I love that.
Very well. Well
But
played. Well played.
but wait,
But wait.
that is not the final domino, and I will not rob Evan of his lunar-like glee at talking of the Dragon Kill War, only to say that when I first read about it as a young man in middle school or high school, I'm not sure, the the turn of phrase that was used, right? That it was named such not because of what humans did to the dragons, but because of what the dragons did. Lodged permanently kind of in the back of my brain. So Evan, tell us about the Dragon Kill War at the end of the age. Tell us a story, my friend.
Yeah. So overnight, the EWF disappears. All of its leadership assassinated. But of course, the core of the empire, the glittering cities that still exist, all of the treasure and other things, that have been taken from other places, things that the Dragonutes were not interested in, uh, we're still within Dragon Pass, and the powers that were outside of it still looked upon the lands of Dragon Pass um, as one, the source of misery and domination that had happened in places like Darahapa and Talistar, and two, as some place that was ripe for the taking. It took several generations of sort of the establishment and the reestablishment of Carmania and Darahapa, but they eventually turned their eyes to the pass and decided that it was time for a little payback. And they decided that the real authors of their misery were, of course, anything draconic, and the most notable of those were the Dragonutes. And so it was at heart a genocidal war. Not only are we going to invade, are we going to punish and devastate this region and plunder it, but we are going to make sure that Dragonutes are not going to come back and invade our lands anymore, occupy, fill it with garrisons, etc. And we're going to invade their cities, and we're going to use every power that's available to us, including chaos, to destroy their eggs and poison their nests, so that their cycle of rebirth, because they are mortal.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the things. You could kill an army of Dragonutes, and their spirits would go back to their ancestral homes. They would be reborn. So they, they systematically seek to eliminate the Dragonutes from Dragon Pass. They call themselves the True Golden Horde, um, and they spend about 20 years marching and fighting and destroying. And there are defenders. Of course, they're the survivors of not the leadership, but sort of the middle and lower classes of the empire are there, and they still have a certain kinship with the Dragonutes, even though the empire has been decapitated also by them. And trolls from the Shadowlands, etc., trying to fight against this army, which seems unstoppable. But one thing you don't want to do is try to annihilate part of dragonkind, because it makes uh, the vast powers of the dragons of the cosmos unhappy. And
So I
in
guess
11,
I guess we could tell Eric that chaos does have a small part to play in the downfall of
yeah,
the EWF, but chaos they invited in, which is a warning to the Lunars and all those who
I,
associate with them
I don't, I don't
in the
see
Third Age.
anything. You know who's messing around with the dragon stuff? The
Who's messing
servants.
around with chaos? All I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I mean, you bring up we jokingly bring up a good point. The fact that we've talked about how hubris was at the core of both of these empires, and pride does not allow you to come to any conclusion that you were at fault for your actions.
Oh yeah.
Pride sort of demands that you place the blame somewhere else.
Well, and I'm sure the True Golden Horde thought, look what they made us do. They forced us into this. Like
Those
if they
tricky,
hadn't those
divided tongue dragonutes definitely caused me to undergo a surgery to rewrite my brain and my mouth, and
Mhm.
that I did voluntarily by choice. And
Right. Well, but then, yeah. Anyway, so the dragons from across the cosmos uh, respond, um, and
violently.
there's a passage that describes this. First dream dragons flew in individually and in packs. Real dragons dropped from the stars like screaming meteors, with howling more terrible than a winter storm. An ancient range of hills rose, leaving behind Red Dragon Vale, but that was not the largest dragon. Many years later, a ghost gave his children a glimpse of the endless monsters which frightened the entire army of Rabanth to death. So, Rabanth is one of the three great cities of Darahapa. Its entire army simply dropped dead of fear.
Yeah.
And even the Sun Dragon came to devour the priests of Desatar.
Yeah.
So,
It's such
yeah.
a terrifying thing that for centuries,
Yeah.
humanity refuses to go into Dragon Pass. Like even tempted to step foot in Dragon Pass because of the slaughter that was, I mean, on just a scale unfathomable to the human mind. The slaughter that was laid out.
And a slaughter that yet was also targeted.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things is that, sort of unfortunately, that there wasn't a differentiation between friend and foe. Now, maybe there were not that many friends of the Dragonutes left at that point, but all humans, no
There were no
exceptions,
non-combatants in the
no
Dragon Kill
non-combatants.
War.
All humans were eliminated from Dragon Pass. But the Beastmen, untouched, the elder races, trolls, elves, dwarfs, such as they were in the past, untouched. Um, and um, and with that, this this punctuation of, fear dragons, uh, and don't, you know be very careful. Uh, Stick to the old ways. Don't push the boundaries, because this look at what happened. The
Yeah.
world is broken, almost as broken as it was at the end of the Gods War.
Humanity becomes very hidebound. They clamp down on innovation, exploration, experimentation on the hero quest side because of the damage done by these two empires. So, as promised last time, we have now reached the end of the Second Age. And I want to start off with the parallels between the machine god and the seven mothers and the red goddess. Because I think this is interesting. Because when we get to this, probably in 2025, we're going to see another group of humans who have created, recreated, rescued, depending on where on the propaganda spectrum you fall, uh, a new god inside the net of creation and the net of time. And much like with the machine city and Zistor, the gods show up, and they show up to put this down because this violates the Great Compromise. And Orlanth shows up to strike the killing blow. And the main changes, the main difference is not just the players, but the outcome. Zistor falls. The machine city is destroyed, plundered, and basically cursed. Orlanth is defeated by the Red Goddess, and the Lunar Empire becomes ascendant. And so these things kind of, again, they move in circles. Arcat and Argrath, right? There are these, to use that oft used clip from an interview with George Lucas. It's like poetry; it rhymes. Just not all poetry is great. So we see this kind of play out. And so one of the things I love about that as a GM is look for your favorite stories in the Second Age, the things that you're like, oh, that's awesome. Just because it happened an age ago does not mean that you cannot bring it back or bring back some version of it in the Third Age. That's what recapitulation is, taking something and rearranging it and putting it back in a new place. Do that with Zistor or Duraster or the God Learner maps. We talked about this at the end of the last episode. These are key inspirational pieces for our Third Age games, as well as the fact that if you're wondering why Sartorites are so traditional and hidebound, I give you the end of the Second Age. Like, there's a reason for it. There is a reason for the locking down of traditions, usually in response to a massive crisis or apocalypse. Commissar, good to see you. Stopped in to say hi. Um, and then also, right, we have 6 centuries where we're going to see, no pun intended, the sea closed. And one of the great hero quests and great heroes of the Third Age opens the seas up again. And so this clashing of empires, this fall of empires, this rise of heroes, capital H in the Gloranthan term, sounds very familiar to those of us who are familiar with 1625 onward. We're going to see a clash between a unified Sartar in the Lunar Empire. We're going to see a clash between the traditionalists and those who have done all of this experimenting, right? In some ways, you could argue, as Evan so snarkily and eloquently put it earlier, right? If I point my finger at the Lunars and say, you guys are the inheritors of the God Learners, they are rightly justified in pointing back at the Sartorites and say, yeah, well, did you learn anything from the EWF? Mister, I'm summoning a dragon to swallow a temple. Fair point. Evan, what about you? I want to talk about the Mongoose Second Age stuff, but before we get to that,
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things we learned from the Second Age is that, the great um, hero wars that are the playground
mm-hmm,
for our games um, are going to be the end of the Third Age. Like, the whatever glory and amazing stories that are going to get told, um, the sort of pent up powers um, of the age are going to be expended, and um, is it going to be like the first age? Is it going to be like the second age? Well, it's not going to be exactly like either of those, but it's going to be very similar, and uh, um, it it may be worse, right? Um, and so keeping that in mind, keeping that in perspective, that the the blueprint of the cycles of time uh, are um, are glorious and terrible altogether is, I think, an informative point of view. And like you said, to weave in sort of echoes of things that happened in the second age or the first age, and have those callbacks and touchstones uh, to um, to put in front of your players, I think really enriches the play. And of course, we see that in a lot of published adventures and a lot of things that have come across the Johnstown Compendium. Um, and I think mixing and matching those things and making them your own, as we've always said, that taking uh, uh, the fundamental creed of your Glorantha will vary, and what's true is what happens at your table. Um, is to take those things and really really run with them. That's
now there are some great resources that depending on where you listen to them or read about them being talked about, um, their canonicity will vary. Um, as Evan says in our notes, find cautious inspiration from. There are a quintet of books from the Mongoose publishing area that Evan says, "Hey, these are some great places to go look at." And I can tell you just from the list of names here, Lawrence Whitaker wrote three of them. Who Lawrence Whitaker worked on RuneQuest 6, which became Mithras, which spectacularly good D100 game. He did Dar Harpa Stirs. He did Pavis Rises in the Abiding Book. Gareth Ryder Hanrahan of 13th Age, Night's Black Agents, Laundry, the One Ring just came out with the Moria, wrote the Moria book for Free League, and is a fantastic author as well. The Black Iron Gods books and the Sword series that just came out. He wrote Blood of Orlanth, and I still can't believe that Aaron Dembski Bowden wrote The Clanking City, because I had The Clanking City and I liked it. And Aaron Dembski Bowden is by far my favorite 40K author. And yes, I understand that Dan Abnett exists, and I love Dan Abnett. But Aaron Dembski Bowden's first Heretic is downright scary, and that man is a genius, like a brilliant writer. So before we wrap up, Eric posts some questions in the chat, Evan, that I would like us to take the last 5 minutes of the show and talk about, if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
So, first of all, I'll start off. If the God Learners were in part of Greg's critique of the Enlightenment rationalist thinking, who is he critiquing through the story of the EWF? So, if he's critiquing anyone, and I don't think you're necessarily wrong, because the God Learners is a very practical look at the fallout of rationalism, or, as we said last time, the over application of and systemizing of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, Hero of a Thousand Faces. I think kind of the warning, if you were at Chaosium Con and got to look at the little Greg Stafford video that we put together, Greg was raised, went to Catholic school, and saw what he saw as a bunch of people blindly following the mystical or religious traditions that he was being brought up and around. That could be one source. It could just be a very honest and human look of, hey, these are two poles, pure mysticism, pure rationality. And neither gives us a complete picture. And the more you drift to one side or the other, the more dangerous you become to yourself and those around you. Evan, any thoughts on that before we look at the other two questions? Because Eric, thanks for the questions. These are great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, I think some people would sort of talk about Greg Stafford and his life's journey, his not just as a game maker and imaginative person, but also as a lifelong learner and a spiritual explorer, as being, you know, out of that sort of 70s you know, fascination with mysticism and with you know, he called himself a shaman.
Yeah.
But you know, maybe this was also some of a sort of a self critique of all of the ways that that can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That those explorations that ended in uh, you know, cults, or you know, cults of personality, or you know, from uh, the sorts of things that, you know, that flourish, that sort of, but that got big because of, you know, celebrity interest, you know, what the Beatles were doing, or things that sort of pulled in uh, uh, people who were maybe a little lost. Anything from, you know, the Rajneeshas to the to Jonestown.
Mm-hmm.
That
So I was just thinking
that
about Jonestown.
that that uh, the sort of surrendering of. So in some ways, I think maybe it's his critique of empire as much as anything, of like, you can have this spiritual um, journey and spiritual longing, but when you use that as sort of more of a pyramid scheme to fuel your domination,
Yeah.
then that you've really lost your spiritual path.
There might be a interesting look at comparing the EWF with Paul Atreides and like the Fedaykin, the rise of the Fremen, because both are critiquing, I think, very similar aspects, Herbert and Stafford, respectively, in those spots. Question two. I hope that helped, by the way, Eric. Question two: could someone hero quest to the moment the gods go after Ziztor? I think 100%. Oh, Evan is giving me the
I'm
actually.
I'm giving you sort of the actually. I mean,
Your
because
Glorantha will vary. No,
yes, well,
my sword
hero
and my
quest.
shield.
Yeah, that's right.
Hero quest is only for the god time.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's not time travel. Um, and I think the way that I would tell that story would be um, in a sort of a flashback. I think that this was something that I was first introduced to by Vampire the Masquerade, but I'm sure it wasn't solely from that, but it's where I was introduced to, is that the idea is that in some way you learn the story, but to learn the story,
You
you
play
play
through
the
it.
story. And so,
I love that.
your folks are going into the machine ruins, and to find out, to find something, to regain something, to get some piece of information or wisdom. Um, and so then um, you collect everybody's character sheets. Here's the characters. It's now 9/17, the end of the siege of the Machine City, and we're going to play through so that you find out, uh, this is the effect of reading the scroll, because that tells you,
Mhm.
where to find the thingamajig. Um, and that's the way that I would sort of do it. But I mean, canonically, no, you cannot travel back to
Now,
the
see,
time that Orlanth
I would
smashed
argue,
Zister.
I would argue with you on this point, Evan.
Okay.
And again, this is where your Glorantha will vary. But I will point out Evan plays in my games, so no. Orlanth fighting Zistor, and Orlanth at, is it the Blue Castle where he
Mm-hmm.
fights?
Castle Blue. Yeah.
In my mind, are both moments where the god time breaks into time because of the contradictory nature of a new god being born. We said the gods themselves rebelled against Zistor and showed up to attack. Right? We have the same. So I would personally disagree with Evan, and that's kind of the fun of this, right? Is that in my Glorantha, I would say at those moments where the god time definitely seemed to break in, I would allow a very difficult hero quest to go back. I think Evan's view is also 100% correct at Evan's table, and is another great way of handling it, because I love taking players' character sheets and giving them new ones and saying, now you have to play these. I think it's just a fun mechanic to use at the table. Um,
One tiny, tiny reply, with my, fear of experimentation, exploration, and rebellion against new ideas. Um, uh, the
I know,
canonical
I know,
explanation would be that Orlanth was manifest through one of his worshipers
I
at those
know,
at those at those
I
moments.
know.
But all
Listen,
right,
it's
okay,
to me, it's the
no,
rule of cool there.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
All right,
And
last
whatever is
question.
cool at your table,
Yeah,
you do that.
100%. I'm just saying I could
I'm just
justify the
well
sophistry.
actuallying you.
Yes, that's fine. You just need to know that uh, every time you actually me, my finger moves towards the mute button just because I could control that, and you could actually me, and no one could hear it. What kind of remnants or EWF goodies, however mundane, do you think PCs could find in a ruin, even if just old manor? Oh man, I think that. So first of all, we see a lot of the actual powerful artifacts being reclaimed by the Dragon Newts. But I love the idea of sending heroes into a corrupted, chaos tainted, and corrupted dragon newt nest to recover some of those by a priest who may be straying a little too far into the EWF um,
I,
theology.
yeah, I've got a couple of answers. One, there is a Johnstown Compendium volume, Treasures of
Mm-hmm.
Glorantha 2,
Yes.
uh, that is completely focused on God Learner and EWF treasures. So
Dang it.
if you if if you want to take somebody's ideas and run with those,
Mm-hmm.
that has been, I think, a successful product that came out fairly recently. Um, Other examples that we have from the story, of course, there's the banner of the EWF, which
Mm-hmm.
Argrath recovers. It's talked about in King of Sartar, and also possibly the dragon teeth that he has that create the I forget the exact term, but the basically the dragon tooth runners, I think is what they're called. That basically very similar to, the teeth of the Hydra that spring up into warriors. These are dragon teeth that he can throw out and, have another military unit show up to fight for him. I think those are both, they're certainly dragon related, that canonically Argrath wields. Um, and I think there are um, many other possibilities. I think you want to make it very special and
Yes.
unique. So thinking about, what was the project? What link to the enlightenment of the cosmic dragon, or again, the war dragons. That is the organization that was the military that integrated, trolls and Dragonute infantry and dinosaur mounted cavalry and worms and dragons flying. Just think about, what equipment would that kind of military have as far as weapons, armor, or auxiliary items that would be useful in that kind of situation. And finding one of those would be, pretty cool.
So I think I would start with what aspect of draconic nature was being investigated in this area. Is it an aspect of their magic, their physical strength, their physical characteristics, their metaphysical symbolism? And then kind of distill it down. So, claws of the dragon, right? What does that actually mean? What could be distilled from that, and kind of work my way down and say, okay, here is what they find here because here's what was going on here. I realize that may be a very abstract way of working on it, but I love the EWF because they're so abstract. Well, that brings us to the end of this show. We'll be back in October with an episode that I haven't even told Evan what it's about, but I'm going to tell him what it's about this time. We are going to actually, I'm going to interview Evan. We're going to talk about Red Moon and Warring Kingdom at the end of October. Talk about 13th Age Glorantha, why we love it, which we've already done an episode on 13th Age Glorantha, but I really want to. I mean, we've got a show about exploring Glorantha, and Evan has done far more exploring of it than I have, and you can check it out for free on drivethrurpg.com. And so next month, I'm going to put the outline together, Evan, and we're going to chat about the awesome book that you've put together and the resources that are now available to people, GMs, readers, lovers of Glorantha. And I think that'll be a good way to really slide into year 4.
That sounds great. I look forward to it. And, just a little recapitulation of 13th Age. There we go.
So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I am JM, and this is my co-host Evan, and this has been Exploring Glorantha. Until then, there is another way.
We are all us.